House Committee on Judiciary come to order. Today is Tuesday, May 16th, 2017. First item on the agenda is Senate Bill 117A. Senator Riley.
Thank you, Chair Barker.
Old habits.
Thank you, Chair Barker. Members of the committee, Senate Bill 117A places certain additional prohibitions and requirements on towers. There are no amendments, and there is a minimal fiscal and a minimal revenue impact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Chuck Riley, Senate District 15, Hillsborough, Cornelius, Forest Grove, North Plains, and a lot of farms in the middle. This bill comes to you today because of some issues. We worked on this issue back in 2007 with Senator Gordley and made some good progress, but it has not done everything that we need to have done. So this bill is an update to that. Let me give you a couple of stories to tell you why we need to do this. An apartment building where a husband and wife lived, and as part of their rental agreement, they had their assigned parking space. The husband went to work, and his wife, who was due, had to go to the hospital. Her mother came to pick her up, parked in their parking space, their assigned parking space, went in to get her daughter ready to go to the hospital, get her clothes packed, and etc. Came out and the car was gone. This is not acceptable. We need to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen. When cars are stolen from the parking places where they're assigned parking space. And this bill will help to deal with that. Again, we've been working on this for a long time, and I hope that we'll be able to make it a little better this time.
Okay. 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 Any questions for Senator? Thank you.
It's too easy.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
I call Cheryl Heimstra.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chair Barker, members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Heemstra. I'm the Deputy Legislative Director at the Oregon Department of Justice. Just a brief history for you on the Senate side. There were 3 different bills on towing. 117, 133, and 488. You'll hear 488, I hope, in a few minutes. 133 was our bill, the Attorney General's bill, and we were able to loop in the kind of technical fixes we had from 133 into 117 in front of you today. And maybe technical fixes, maybe a little bit of a light term for that. I would call them stipulated fixes. We sat down with the towers, maybe even last fall already on this bill. We had taken a look at our consumer complaint hotline, and towing is an issue that comes up quite frequently. Often in a towing situation, there's a lot of emotions. It can be kind of tense. You may have just crashed. A lot of things can be happening in that moment, and we do get a lot of complaints in our consumer complaint hotline. We look through those for any common themes and any areas of the law where clarification would help in those situations. So that's our fixes in 117. And you'll hear from Aaron Dodd as well about the great working relationship we've had with the towing community. They really did come to the table and work with us and came up with some great solutions here. So in the bill, you'll see some parts that are moving around, parts that are deleted and then restored in other areas. When the bill was originally written, and I think in 2007, it was one of those bills that kind of ends up spidering in all different ways. This just kind of cleans up and makes it a little more linear for folks who are reading the statute. On page 5, you'll see some changes. In the existing law, it says the tower has to take a picture of the car if it's parked illegally. It didn't clarify that the consumer was able to get a copy of that photo. So we're just clarifying that they get that at no charge. It also clarifies that the tower must tow to the nearest parking or storage facility that they have within the county that the tow is happening in. We've seen some towers, unfortunately, who charge per mile, taking advantage of that and kind of go to the facility that's furthest away in order to rack up charges. And I want to iterate, that's probably not most towers, that's just some of the bad actors out there. Third, the bill better defines a hookup. So when an actual tow truck is hooked up to a car or loaded onto a tow truck, certain rights and obligations apply both to the consumer and to the tower. The existing definition of hookup wasn't quite clear, so we added some clarity there. Finally, we added in that the signage on any parking facility must be clear and conspicuous. There's been some issues where maybe a sign was knocked down or wasn't quite clear enough about where you could park and when. So just adding those words in to make sure that when consumers are towed that they've had good notice. And you've heard Senator Riley talk about the patrol towing issue as well. So that's the fixes in the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Representative Greenlee.
Yes, if I'm asking about a specific application. This talks about the authority of an apartment building that has more units than there is parking places. I live in a condo and came out the other day and found somebody parked in a parking place which I own and pay taxes on the parking place. It's kind of weird. When I checked with the condo about what could be done about it, they said it was up to the individual owner of the individual parking place to call for towing. How does that fit in? I didn't want to do that because I didn't want anybody's car towed away, but how does that fit into this model in a multiple dwelling unit that's a condo where the individual owners own the individual parking places?
Chair Barker, Representative Greenlick. So in current law, if you have more cars and parking spaces in an apartment complex, there's certain rules you have to follow in order for the tow to happen. In your case, I would think they are correct. You need to call them yourself since you own that spot.
How do I certify to the tower that I really own that parking place?
Chair Barker, Representative Greenlick. So the bill actually says you need to have the owner's permission before you tow. So theoretically, you would probably call the tower. They would say, "So we do have your permission to tow this car away. It's this one here," and maybe give some specifics. And then the tower is required to keep that information, that permission from you, on file. So if the car owner comes later and says, "Why did my car get towed?" they can pull that out and say, "We had permission from the landowner."
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Matter of personal curiosity.
Yeah. Representative Vial.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Greenlick's question kind of raises one for me. In the bill on page 3 at line 43, it says that a tower may not tow a motor vehicle from a parking facility unless there's a sign displayed in plain view at that parking facility. Do you interpret that to mean that a sign generally in the condo complex covering all parking spaces would be sufficient, or because these are individually owned, everybody would have to have their own sign in their parking space?
Chair Barker, Representative Bile, I'm not sure. I do note that parking facility has the meaning given in 98-805. I'm not sure I have that on me at the moment, but it might be, that the condo doesn't qualify as a parking facility.
So if it doesn't qualify as a parking facility, then the owner of the parking space would have to, actually in 98-805 it says a parking facility means any property used for vehicle parking. So that's not going to help us solve that question. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Barker, if I could, too.
Sure.
Right before the hearing, a concern was raised about 98-856, which gives certain requirements about how the towing company operates to the consumer, and how that information was deleted on page 2 at lines 8 through 10. I think you might be hearing a concern about that coming up. I will note, I did look in the bill, and the information is still required. In 856 on page 6, it just says the tower shall disclose this information no matter what kind of tow. So the information would be required for I think every kind of tow. The deletion of that language I don't think should change that intent. So
Okay,
thank
good,
you.
thank you. Okay, thank you very much. James Husk and Sean Cruz.
Good afternoon. Chair Barker, members of the committee. My name is Sean Aaron Cruz, and I began work on this issue in the 2005 legislative session when I was working for Senator Gordley, and continued through the 06 interim, and in the 07 session I led her work group on Senate Bill 431 and participated in the Attorney General's Senate Bill 116 as some of Senator Gordley's concepts were moved into that bill. And it feels really great to be back in the building, I want to say that. And it's good to see you. And if you were in office in 07, I thank you again for your vote. Senate Bill 431 drew unanimous votes on both sides of the building and inspired Jack Oman to create this wonderful cartoon, which you all should have. But here it is 10 years later, and you know, we're still working on the same problem, and in part, first of all, I want to give you Senator Gordley's perspective and legislative intent was to protect the populations living in low-income housing apartment complexes, people of color, immigrant populations, people with limited English skills, who don't know how things work here, and are generally pretty grateful just to have a place to live. And we know how the pressure on housing costs is right now. And among the things that we wanted to accomplish then, which Senate Bill 117 does address, is eliminate this practice of where a tow driver working on commission makes all the judgment calls, and largely in the dead of night. And this is where people make their homes. And one of the things that we required was that the towers provide to the owner of the vehicle, prior to towing the vehicle, the cost information. So the tenant should know, how much money do I have to have in my pocket 24/7 without notice to satisfy a tow truck driver if a tow truck driver shows up. And then where are they going to take my car? And how much money am I going to need to have with me when I get there? And those are vital pieces of information. And I have a concern in 117 where was just mentioned on page 2, lines 5 through 7, where that line, those 3 lines are taken out. And again on page 4, lines 6 or 7. And that was a critical part of Senate Bill 116. And so the question is that language moved somewhere else into the bill? But where I see it existing in the current version of the bill is that the tower can provide that information any time. But our intent was that the tenant know in advance. The property owner knows, the tow company knows, they should have the prices that the tower charges for goods and services when they sign the agreement. And that's only fair. Senator Gordley's motivation that guided all our work on these bills was fair notice, which is also relates to the signage that is in this bill. Again, we required that signage 10 years ago, that every parking facility that is patrol towed has to have a sign at every entrance. And yet 10 years later, it's easy to drive around and see properties where that's not taking place, because there'll be signs somewhere else, but nothing at the entrance. I'm sure that's the case in everybody's district. And another fundamental is that we moved, in Senate Bill 116, we moved the line that is, it's an unfair trade practice for a tower to provide consideration in exchange for the privilege of towing a vehicle from a property. And in that statute, it defines providing goods and services below fair market value as consideration. The towers in this private property impound scheme provide the services for free to a certain class of their customers, which happen to be residential, apartment owners. free. And the city argues that since all of the towers have colluded into the system to provide the services for free, the fair market value is therefore zero. And it is 10 years later, and the system still operates exactly as it did 10 years ago. And I'm wondering, what does it take to get the law enforced around here? And the issue of towers showing up face-to-face with a person like an immigrant, for example, who has no idea whether citizens' rights would apply to them, even if they knew what citizens' rights were, because there is no place anywhere in the state, not on the Attorney General's website, not on the City of Portland's website, nowhere else that I can find, where a clearly stated description of what a member of the public's rights are regarding involuntary towing. It just doesn't exist anywhere. Among the things that we also outlawed 10 years ago was these patrol towers were acting like they were police, and they would patrol a lot, and if a car in there had an expired tag, they would tow it, expired registration. It's legally parked. We put it in statute that they couldn't do that, and yet the practice is still going on. And I provided, I don't know if you have the electronic version yet, of a lease agreement for images of Columbia Apartments in Northeast Portland. And this is one of those properties that was drawing high numbers of tows 10 years ago, and it's still happening now. It's month after month after month. The last 3 months that the city has records posted, November 2016, 9 cars were towed from there. The month before, 17 cars, and the month before that, 10 cars. And these numbers go all the way back. And then in another example, in Representative Sanchez's district, is a place called Ridgecrest Timbers on North Columbia, which in October last year, 9 cars were towed, and the following month, 17. Are these cases of just egregiously sloppy parking, or is there something else going on here?
And Mr. Chris, we need to wrap up because members
Okay.
have to leave the.
That's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to say, but I do want to reinforce that language about providing the tenants that information before the vehicle towed is critical. So I'm hoping that part continues to be in the bill.
Good. Thank you very much for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Cruz? Okay, please.
Hello, my name is James Husk. We never did this before, so just trying to give you a little bit of my opinion of this Senate bill. I've been a tow company, the biggest private property impounding business in Lane County for 20 years. I think Senate bill is a bill that protects violators of the law. This bill's there's legal government laws already set in place in cities across Oregon, including Eugene, Tualatin, and Albany. Albany just recently set their own regulations on private property towing and towers that go in and do this, what he's talking about with the towing from apartment complexes, etc. I think putting in place the Senate Bill 117 would help violators be violators of the law, as the provisions of the bill making property owners be present at the time at which the tow could be all hours of the night. It could be 3 a.m., 4 a.m. The property owner has to be present to have these cars towed. As of now, we have a contract with the property owners. In those contracts, there are stipulations that apply to whatever the parking facility or parking lot is. We enforce these as a tow company, but all in all, the property owners do put the rules and regulations on the tenants. Now, I don't know about across Oregon, but I know in Eugene, most of our property owners, they have contracts. When they sign a lease, they sign a towing contract and a parking violation contract. And this is all over the city of Eugene. Eugene has put in place requirements on the towers and the property owners where we have to have signs in plain view sight within 10 feet of a parking spot. They have to be no less or no higher than 10 feet high, 3 feet by 3 feet in diameter with no smaller than 3-inch lettering on them so they can be read. City of Eugene is also, the council there has put in ordinance that us tow companies can't just go in and take a car. We have to call the police first. We have to give them the make and model of the vehicle, where the vehicle's located at. They run a check on it, make sure the car ain't stolen. Then they give us a pre-call time and date. Then we tow the car. So it's not like we're sitting around just looking for these cars and grabbing them and you know, it's a 5-minute parking. These people are usually there for an amount of time before they get towed. It takes a while to hook a vehicle up. We have a lot of football games, a lot of basketball games at the University of Oregon. A lot of apartment complexes, a lot of businesses suffer from the parking because of this. If we require to have the owner of the property present to have these cars towed and wait there and sign a tow bill, it's going to take a lot of time. There could be a lot of, most of the time how this comes about and property owners have us tow cars is because they've had a bad run-in with somebody not abiding by the signs that are clearly there. And so usually they call us in and we're pretty much the bad guy because we're towing the people that are violating signs. I don't see this as a statewide problem. I see it as we have certain areas of the state that we have these problems. We have a guy here in Salem, Oregon that has pretty much brought this bill about. His practice isn't very good. How we regulate that, I don't know. But one bad apple is kind of bringing all this about again for the rest of us. We work with our city government to try to put in regulations city by city. I just don't think that, you know, the provision in this bill with 117 of having property owners, that some of them that are out of state that aren't even here happen to be present to have the car towed. I see that being a big problem. Pretty much all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Husky? Representative Sanchez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me, because there's some pieces in the bill that about a car being hooked up or not hooked up. What is, in your opinion right now, because, you know, I've had people say that to me, or that situation, well, they said they already hooked it up, so they wouldn't let it go, and they would charge me this much money and blah, blah, blah. What does hooked up mean?
Well, hooked up means the vehicle would be completely on the flatbed, fastened down, and ready to tow out. Or if you're using a wheel lift, the vehicle would have to be completely fastened to the vehicle with the tow lights on it, ready to go.
Okay. Mr. Chair, follow up, please.
Follow up, please.
So if you were at the point of just putting, you got maybe one of those little things attached or whatever, but the other one wasn't attached, that would not be hooked up.
That's not fully hooked up. Has to be fully hooked up.
So when someone says that, oh, it's already hooked up, as they're finishing the other side, then they're not actually doing.
That's correct.
Okay. So they are in the wrong there, and yet that happens.
I think it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We're just checking on something here for a second.
It doesn't with our company, but we can't speak for everybody. And I understand there is companies out there that's not doing things like they should.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. And we're not going to move the bill today. We're going to take a little look